The Still Loading podcast is brought to you by the wonderful people on Patreon. Amazing people like Kevin from the Bit by Bit Foundation, Melissa S., Matt aka Stormageddon, Gilmer, Stephen P., Pib Extra, and Mr. Biscuits have all been wonderful enough to support the show over there. So if you would also like to get your name read at the beginning of an episode, along with a bunch of other goodies, go over to patreon.com/stillloadingpod and check out everything it has to offer. On this episode of Still Loading, gotta catch 'em all is the consumer mantra of our time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today's episode, I am so excited to speak with my guest today. As you know, I'm a big fan of video game history. I've talked about a lot of the show. In fact, this year, I've had a lot of really fun guests all about kind of game preservation and game history. Shout out to Lane Nooney from a few weeks ago talking about ROM chip and all that good stuff. But one of the major parts of game history is understanding not just the games, and I've talked about it ad nauseum, but just looking at the games themselves isn't enough to talk about game history, isn't enough to preserve game history. You also have to talk about the culture around the games when the games came out. We're focusing on the late 90s on this episode, about a book that my guest wrote about the late 90s and the pop culture of the late 90s and how that affected media back then and how it continues to affect us today. Joining me today to talk about his book, 1999, is Ross Benish. Ross, how are you doing today?
Hey, man, I'm doing good.
I'm happy to have you on. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I'm excited to, I told you off mic, repeating it here. I've been looking forward to this. I didn't finish your book. I read a few chapters of it. Specifically, obviously, there's a whole chapter on video games, which is, specific to my show here. But I do think even the rest of your book, like you have chapters about porn, about the insane clown posse. I think all of that does tie into games in some way, shape, or form, because it is all part of the culture history, which the pop culture landscape at the time, which does affect games and everything like that. So I enjoyed reading what I did of your book. I read, like I said, I focused on the game section, but there's a lot of like really interesting insights that you put into this book, and I'm really excited to chat with you. So yeah, grateful that I have you on the show. I guess to start off here, the first question I have for you is, what kind of like drew you to, like, how did you come up with the idea? How did you make the observation that kind of spawned this book? Like, where did this book come from? I guess is the first question. Like, how did you kind of come up with the idea for it?
Well, it wasn't like one eureka moment, but there's just like a handful of crazy things that have happened in our culture in the last 6 to 8 years.
What are you talking about? It's been normal the whole time. Nothing crazy has happened. We have a very sane president,
and normal for a reality show, I suppose.
Yeah,
but they like, for give you an example, when Hulk Hogan defeated Gawker in a lawsuit, and he claimed to be a different person on Howard Stern's show than when he's in his private life. That was like very interesting to me, that you'd see kayfabe work in the court, like the way it would in the wrestling ring, like that he convinced the jury using pro wrestling storytelling techniques. And that made me think like, well, like pro wrestling is like really in our culture. Real life is getting more fake. That's why it's resembling pro wrestling more. And wrestling peaked in the 90s. So, I looked at the influence of 90s wrestling on today's world. And then they were just like, Insane Clown Posse coming back in a like bigger than ever way with their March in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
With the video game chapter, I suppose just anytime I saw like a moral panic online about kids and TikTok or social media in general, it reminded me of how video games are targeted. So each chapter kind of had a moment or series of moments that made me go, well, that reminds me of something like the entertainment I loved as a kid in the 90s. And I decided to focus on the things then that were the most disparaged in the 90s. So like video games are in this chapter in this book. There's
Mm-hmm.
actually the longest chapter of the book. It's like 50 pages. um People today probably wouldn't consider them to be trashy. Like the other stuff in my book is porn and reality TV and Jerry Springer and Insane Clown Posse. But like when you look at it in the 90s and the way games are discussed in the press and the way they were treated by non-gamers, they very much were disparaged at that time. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what's considered low culture in one era doesn't translate to the next, but that's kind of what started this book.
And you are very clear with that, because I know gamers are a passionate bunch, as I am one as well. And you were telling me you also, do you still play games? I know you said you played games growing up. Are you still a gamer now?
Not really right now. I wish I was. I have two kids that are under 3 years old,
That
and
would take up a lot of your time.
oh
That
yeah, and I'm
does.
just I'm just tired. Like when like they're asleep right now, the games take more mental energy than I can be a vegetable watching Netflix when I'm not with them. That's like
I I I can 100% relate to that. It took me a while after my daughter was born to like get back into playing games, and I don't know, I only have one, like let alone two under three, right? Like that's a lot. So I totally underget. I
yeah, maybe
totally
when they get
understand that.
older, and if they get into it, that'd be an
Hmm.
excuse for me to get back into it. But I'm probably 7 years away from that or something.
You never know. My daughter is 4 and she plays the Bluey game on Switch.
Oh,
It's not a good game, just to be clear, but it's good for kids. It's good for that age range. It's very simple game mechanics and whatnot. But no, I want to backtrack just a smidge, because I don't know how much of my audience crosses over with wrestling fandom. I can tell you I've never really gotten into wrestling, though now I wish I had, because like I hear I a lot of people I've met through podcasting are wrestling fans, and they'll talk about the storylines and this and that. But I think you threw out a specific term that I know is known within wrestling fandom and within wrestling in general, but not people outside of it might not know that. So what does kayfabe mean?
um, kayfabe is just presenting something as genuine as when it isn't. Presenting untruth as truth. Like it's the mirage that you have
Hmm.
in pro wrestling, where you have a feud that isn't real, but it is for the purposes of
Of
the
the
story.
entertainment, yeah.
Yeah, the
This
Undertaker really isn't a dead man. Kane really isn't his brother. They're not actually really feuding. These guys are best friends backstage. But for the concept of the show, um, all those fictional aspects are what you buy into and what you believe to make it entertaining.
Mhm,
And,
mhm.
and that concept is now with us in a weird way outside the ring, whether it's Hulk Hogan defending himself in a sex tape scandal lawsuit or half the shit Trump says on a weekly basis.
Yes, as some people like to call it, a post-truth world or whatnot. I don't know if that's true or not, but you see that online and whatnot. And one of the quotes, actually, I mentioned to you off mic, there is a handful of quotes that you wrote, or a handful of quotes from your book that really resonated with me. And the one that like really stuck out to me, it's early on in the introduction, but I really like it. And I think it kind of ties in with like the whole kayfabe thing here is, we're all talk show guests and reality stars seeking attention through confession, equating entertainment with voyeurism. With excuse me, with a reality star president, we don't just watch reality TV, we live it. And I that really connected with me. Because even take out half the shit that Trump says and all the crazy shit that goes on with that. Just the equating entertainment with voyeurism really hit home for me, because sincerity sells, and people will reveal just about anything about themselves for the sake of entertainment. And
Just for
that's
the
a
sake of attention. They're not even getting any financial reward. Usually, just they
mhm,
want people to comment and be interested in it, and give them attention in the same way that a stand-up comic or a young child thrives and needs attention.
mhm. And that's why, man, there's so many things that I found interesting about your book, like the specifically in the chapter, like we mentioned before, in video games, talking about how there's so many, whenever there's a new piece of media that comes in, there's always a group of people who are alarmists and are afraid of this new thing. It's going to bring the downfall of society. And you're seeing that with you saw that with video games in the late 90s. You still see it very sliver today, as you even touch on in the book, how like after the mass shooting in Florida, in Parkland, what park
Yep,
is it,
it's Parkland. It's Parkland.
In Florida. I mean, it's sad that we can't keep track of them all,
Oh yeah, there's
but
so many.
Trump blamed video games once again, and that was only a handful of years ago. um, so it's crazy how that stuff, some of that stuff still persists, but now I would say it's more social media and this and that. Now, I personally totally, I can see all the detriments that people are raising alarms about, but that's a conversation for another day. That's not really for this episode. But yeah, I really enjoyed what I read of your book, and I'm looking forward. I hope my listeners are going to check this out. And I guess for full transparency, listeners, I did get a review copy of this book. Like I said, I did not finish it, but yeah, let's go into this a little bit further. So the the core focus of your book is about late 90s quote unquote low culture. And you touched on it a little bit when I asked, why this book, why did you write about it, and how you made that distinction where video games aren't really low culture, but they were definitely considered that in the late 90s. And your whole book is about low culture, how it affected pop culture back in the 90s, and how it's still affecting us today. So for my listeners for my listeners, just for some clarification for them, what is low culture? And I was going to also ask what are some examples of it, but the examples you provide in your book: Insane Clown Posse, porn, video games, the Beanie Babies and Pokemon, like the collectible fandoms that kind of spawned out of the late 90s and stuff like that. But for the people who may not know what you mean by
Mhm.
that, what do you mean by low culture in this book?
It just means trashy entertainment, or like the entertainment that is pop culture that is the most despised and ridiculed in its time. So like, Jerry Springer, Howard Stern, porn, um, these are things that generally are portrayed as being retrograde, lowest common denominator. Often stuff that's aimed at kids is considered low culture. Obviously, it varies per person on their perception and per era. But like, if you took a poll, what I was aiming for is like, if you took a poll of like adults in the 90s on what entertainment is harming society the most, or what entertainment do they believe is the worst for kids, you'd come up with like the six things I focused on, with video games being one of them. A lot of times low culture is made pretty cheaply. Video games are probably an exception to that, because the budgets
Mm-hmm.
for those games can be quite high, certainly higher than daytime talk shows.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I would say now, would you say now low culture is more kind of in the, what I guess would be like reality TV, or sorry, unscripted television, as they like to call it.
Yeah, reality TV is definitely part of it. I mean, a lot of the stuff that like influencers do online
Mm-hmm.
would be in there. I mean, we have a weird thing now going with all the AI slop. I mean, I would say that's a form of low culture. All the like shitty artwork that people are just, spinning up by typing a prompt into a system and tweeting it out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I literally just showed my wife one earlier today. There was a Skechers ad where it was just some blonde woman where her belly button was way, like, bizarrely like 2 feet above her like waist, and then her shadow was a bicycle. I'm not even making that up. It was just a shadow of a bicycle, but there was no bicycle in the picture. It was just this woman. Just listeners, y'all know where I stand on AI, generative AI, but I gotta stop from ranting. I'll get angry. So yeah, I could totally see that though. And what were some? So you kind of touched on a little bit of it. What were some observations about 1999 the late 90s specifically that kind of sparked it? Like you mentioned the Insane Clown Posse, but were there other ones that kind of like grouped this all together? Like what pop culture references from the late 90s did you see that sparked that connection for you between between then and now?
Well, so I just kind of see Jerry Springer peaked in the late '90s, and I've seen so much of his talk show present with us today, even though that genre of TV programming has kind of died down. The influence of having combative discussion, choreographed fights, people getting up in arms about a scandal for no other reason than to be salacious or crude. I see that in how like people fight with each other on Twitter. You see that in like how Trump dresses down Zelensky or whoever he views as his opponent at that particular time. So the Jerry Springer show, I part of it's I watched a lot of that during the '90s, but that's one that I have a lot of callbacks to, like on a monthly basis in my life.
Mm-hmm. I can almost see like a little bit of those influences even being with like what Jubilee is now on YouTube, where
Oh yeah, totally.
where they put like 30 versus 1 and it's like 30 magas versus 1 progressive. Who's going to win? And it's not an actual fight, but it's a quote unquote debate stage when it's not really, there's no really debating. It's just people yelling at each other for 30
They
minutes.
usually get like just a ton of idiots to debate like one professional opinion, like one professional like cultural critic. It is styled like a daytime talk show. You're right, and we already talked about the wrestling thing with Hogan, with Beanie Babies, with the Beanie Babies. I've just kind of say that whenever there's like a craze that pops up online that
What is
people
it?
get excited
Labubu
about.
is now the big one.
Is that the big one now? I mean, I've lost track since NFTs.
Yeah. What is it? I think it's called Labubu. Yeah, Labubu. It's just a new like plush toy, and I don't know if it's still going on like a craze, but it was. There's literally the first thing that popped up on my Google search: Labubu versus Lafufu. How to know if your doll is real or fake? Like, there's already people making fake dolls. That's how you know there's a
Yeah.
craze going on.
Yeah. So, a lot of these things I'm looking at, I just see their influence like in a strange way. It might not be as direct, but with video games, I found them very interesting. Though they're a little different in that a lot of the stuff I'm writing about is still viewed as trashy. Like daytime talk shows are still viewed as trashy. Video games took more political heat in the '90s than any of these other forms of pop culture did. But then they emerged from that as like the most powerful entertainment medium. I mean, the just the revenue and time spent that they generate is so substantial, that it was like they were being vilified at the time that they were breaking through, and it's kind of hard to see that as it's happening. But like if you look back at it in retrospect, uh, you break, at like around the same time that they're being blamed for Columbine and all these academic articles are springing up to try to say video games are the worst threat to children. That's when like the first console PlayStation sells over 100 million units.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all that moralizing didn't
Didn't slow it
keep
down
them
at
down.
all.
No, not at all.
It very much, it kind of feels like almost the public will be the thing, not necessarily the pundits, but if there's like a new form of media, a lot of times it feels like the public is going to be the ultimate decider. Like the media tries to influence it as much as it can, but like for example, like look at NFTs, right? You mentioned it before. NFTs were pushed by a lot of companies and a lot of different things. There was like, I remember, what is it? The NBA had NFT trading cards for a little while. I don't know if that still is a thing or
I
not.
doubt it's still a thing, but yeah, they all hopped on the bandwagon.
They all hopped on the bandwagon, and most people were like, "Nope, this is not something we want." Like, take out the atrocious environmental impact and all that other stuff. Just no one saw a use for it, and then it's like, yeah, they still exist, but like it's just a very small niche culture now. I would say more than anything
Yeah, it's
else.
like how Beanie Babies still exist, but they're
Yes.
a fraction of what they were in the 90s.
I'm sure there's still probably some people holding on to their collection from the 90s, hoping that bubble comes back again at some point.
My
But
daughter, we have Beanie Babies, and
mhm.
she rips the tie tags off of them. So if they ever come back, uh, those have lost. If they
All
were
their value.
they're worth $5 now. They're worth $2, I guess.
That's so funny. My daughter did the same thing too. My daughter, we have a bunch of Beanie Babies as well. That I think they came from my wife when she was growing up, and her mom made them keep the tags on them when they were growing up because she saw the bubble
Oh,
with it and
people
everything like that.
put like a locket on them, like the people put them in a glass case, or even if they didn't do that, they would like have like a plastic protective like little locket thing. It would be heart shaped, even like the tie tag, because you had to keep that pristine for it to be a collectible. But they were mass produced to such a degree that like it has no more
Value
rarity.
to it.
Yeah, it has nothing. It's
Did
just used
it?
junk.
So that chapter where you talk about Beanie Babies and Pokemon, that's one of the ones I didn't get to read. Do you talk about game grading and collecting, and do you touch on that at all? Not that that would have I don't know if that would have been applicable. I'm just more curious.
I mean, I talk about like Pokemon collecting and the card game and a little bit of the Pokemon video games, because like in '99, the a lot of the best selling video games are Pokemon. Like there were a lot of
Yes.
Pokemon titles. The Game Boy ones are probably the biggest hit, but like N64 had several Pokemon titles. I feel like the top 10 in the United States, like the 10 games across consoles that sold the most, like half of them were Pokemon. So there was a big video game tie-in. What was interesting about Pokemon is there was a mini panic over the card game. Like there were like Newsweek and Time both had covers about like, is Pokemon evil?
I can
Kids.
tell you that from personal experience. My parents, I love my parents dearly, but they, especially my mom, is an evangelical. Not the craziest of even, but she's an evangelical, and because Pokemon evolved, Ross, because they evolved from one form or another, that was evolution, and evolution is not biblical.
Yeah, the Pokemon theology. I doubt they believe that like those animals have been around for less than 6,000 years.
Yeah, yeah.
It probably doesn't jibe with that worldview.
No, it doesn't. Well, it's not even that. So a lot of it just comes from, it's just, yeah, like you mentioned before, just moral panic. So my mom, it's funny because growing up I had no idea, but like, because you just, whatever happens to you as a kid you consider normal. So when I grew up and I kind of am now more as what I call an ex-evangelical, um and kind of deconstructed a lot of that portion of my life. It was funny seeing how a lot of the stuff my mom was afraid of was just different moral panics. Dungeons and Dragons, she told me it was satanic. I grew up believing that D&D, people would go around and try to summon demons and shit like that. Uh, it was it. She fell for that stuff hook, line, and sinker
She's like the
continuously.
people in Stranger Things then that like are freaking out about the kids playing
Yeah,
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, very much so. And she was never like, she still let us play Pokemon because once she realized what it like, she was open minded enough to be like, okay, this wasn't so bad. It was the same issue though with Harry Potter, since Harry Potter had witchcraft in it. Oh no, can't have that. That's that's anti Jesus or whatever. So I couldn't like she let me read it, but she was skeptical. Like she was wary. She's like, I don't know about this. She was uncomfortable. But props to her for even though growing up in that evangelical space and being committed to it, she kept her mind open enough to let me still to experience Pokemon at the height of Pokemania and whatnot. But the reason I brought up the game collecting thing is that it when you were talking about Beanie Babies and how they were mass produced and the bubble that happened and then it burst, it actually reminds me once again. I know this part isn't in your book, but it kind of goes along with the theme of it as how so much of that type of thing, the stuff that happened, the low culture, quote unquote, in the late 90s, still affecting us today. Graded video games kind of fell into that camp for a little while too. When the pandemic started, game collecting, like video game prices, retro game prices shot up crazily.
Yeah.
And that's also when you see the coming out of WADA as like the premier like game grading company. And you will buy you can buy games, get them graded, put them in a case, and they're valued at whatever condition they're in and all that other stuff. But there was a big clamor for it at first, where because WADA was the company that really pushed, I want to say, for like it was the first time a retro game sold for like over $1 million. I think it was like Mario 64. I think like it was a box copy of Mario 64 sold it for like over $1 million or something like that. And it was crazy. And the bubble burst pretty quickly after that because that was artificially inflated. But that's a whole nother topic that I could go. That would be a whole podcast episode in and of itself. The collecting bubble of the pandemic.
I got into the pandemic did drive me back to retro games, but I did kind of the opposite where I found someone had modified a PS1 and stuck a huge hard drive in it and was selling them on Etsy with like thousands of games built in from all the retro systems. And
that's awesome.
And I was like, hell yeah. It was like the best, like $350 spent. I got so much enjoyment out of that when I was stuck at home for a long time. But that's circumventing everything that real collectors are doing.
Yeah, I am not anti-emulation in any stretch. In fact, actually, this is a little bit of a teaser for my listeners. It really just depends on how this works out. So I can't promise this is going to be the proper order because the episode I'm about to reference has not been recorded yet. But hopefully, the week after this episode comes out, I will be having on Zophar of Zophar's Domain, who was like one of the original ROM emulation sites back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and he was the one that founded it. So I definitely not anti-emulation in essence, which I'll get into that all with obviously Zophar in next week's episode, hopefully.
Oh, nice. That's a good teaser for that.
I didn't plan it. It worked out. So thank you for allowing me to promote my next episode. For your book here, to bring it back to your book, how did you come to choose the examples of low culture that you found? Like I asked before, like what observations did you make that's kind of sparked these connections? But like once you decided, like, okay, I'm going to write a book on this, what was the decision-making process into going like these are going to be my focus points?
There most of these things are things I loved as a kid. So there is bias in like, it's what I'm familiar with. That's part of the reason why that's what stuck out to me when something similar would pop up 25 years later. Like I loved pro wrestling as a kid. I played a shit ton of video games. I watched Jerry Springer with my parents. I was, into ICP. So I had already had a strong familiarity with all these subjects and had things I have been wanting to say and express about them already. Now, there are other topics that could be included that I didn't do, partially because I couldn't think of anything interesting to say. The biggest one would be infomercials. Like, infomercials were huge in the 90s. The infomercials didn't exist until the 80s because they start when Reagan deregulates TV advertising. And once you can have unlimited ads, that's when you have stuff like infomercials. And then you also get stuff like G.I. Joes and Ninja Turtles,
Yep, the
which I
big
love.
cartoon marketing push.
Yep. But in the 90s, infomercials expand because cable TV is expanding in viewership and it's expanding in the number of channels that like are available, and there's just more airtime for paid programming. And the infomercials are super trashy, like Miss Cleo, Girls Gone Wild,
Hmm.
Kevin Trudeau selling fraudulent stuff. But I just couldn't think of like what the great parallel would be today. So I watched a lot of documentaries and old clips and read stuff about them, and then didn't do anything with it. And like the same with, I was thinking about like all the like boy bands and girl groups, like
Hmm.
Lou Pearlman, who was behind Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and some other groups. I mean, he's a real scumbag, Ponzi schemer.
Oh,
But
really?
like,
I did not know about that, actually.
oh yeah, check out if you're interested. I think it's called The Boy Band Con.
Hmm.
Is the documentary about Lou Pearlman, and like he manufactured all of these groups while like just treating the artists like just exploiting the hell out of them. And that's happened a lot in music history. But just how big those that stuff was, and like it was very much appealed to teens. um it was derided during its time, like that shit was made fun of a lot during its time. But I couldn't think of anything like real interesting to say. And I actually like that. Like I like Backstreet Boys and Spice Girls and a lot of that pop music from the 90s. But
Hmm.
I just didn't have like anything. I couldn't think of where to go with it. So like
Yeah.
there's a few times like the six examples I give, which is like reality TV and talk shows, porn, Insane Clown Posse, video games, pro wrestling, and Beanie Babies and Pokemon. There's so many other things that you could do. It's not all encompassing, but like those are the six that I had something to say. And the part of the reason I probably had something to say is because I've spent hundreds, if not thousands, of hours consuming this shit, and
Yeah.
I like most of it.
Though I was going to say, if you're going to ever do infomercials, excuse me, the only thing I could think of as a modern equivalent would be YouTube advertisements.
Mm-hmm.
Because like specifically now, and I don't know if that's enough to like be interesting in terms for a book, but like I think about now how YouTube advertisements, there's a handful, like, you might get a 30-second one. Every now and then you'll get like an 8-minute long one. And if you don't click skip, and it'll just
Yeah,
it's some weird product. Or you have the AI generated, like the auto, even pre-generative AI, you would have like those weird like auto like they wouldn't even hire a voice actor, they would just do the text to speech thing.
yeah.
And you're never going to believe this, I heard back in the night, stuff like, that kind of shit. um to me, that would be the closest thing to infomercials, but once again, I have no idea if there's enough of a connection to make that interesting in the slightest.
In the
uh
one infomercial I was getting for a long time, and it was one of those that was like, it's going to be like a 5 minute YouTube ad if I don't skip it after 90 seconds. It was this, they made it look like an apocalyptic movie, and it was loud. It was like double the decibels. Like if I'm
mm,
watching a cartoon or football highlights or something, like it would come on. It would just like almost scare you. It was just so much louder than the show you're watching. And it ended up being for Scientology. They tell you that
Jesus Christ.
like 60 seconds into the ad, you finally realize what the fuck it's for. And it was like some Scientology thing.
That's what. That's uncomfortable.
I
That
was getting that ad like 3 times a day for a month straight 6 months ago.
that's so, it feels like they come in waves now too, with how the algorithm pushes stuff for you. Like, listen, like I'm not for me on YouTube, it's what I get now. For a couple months, it was all Turning Point USA stuff, and I let me tell you,
Yeah.
listeners, you know where I stand on a lot of this stuff. I don't peruse videos that would the algorithm would direct me to that right leaning that not right leaning that right wing. Uh, I put news in quotations, news whatever. That it's just weird. It's weird how that shit kind of comes on with there. Um, when you mentioned though all the stuff that you included here was because it was something that you experienced personally in writing this book. Was there anything that affected your relationship to the pop culture you grew up with? Like in writing this, did you kind of change your viewpoint on anything that you grew up with, or did it like add context, add nuance? Like did it change how you viewed some of your childhood pop culture experiences in writing this book?
Man, that's a good question. I came to appreciate the crazy genius behind Beanie Babies more. Like
Mm.
I didn't realize they took such a weird path. Like they wouldn't sell to big box stores. So like you couldn't get Beanie Babies at Toys R Us or Walmart or anything like that. They intentionally uh, avoided all sorts of like adaptations or media tie-ins. So like there was never a cartoon or a video game, even though they had many opportunities to do so. They didn't
Hmm.
buy advertising. The only ads that ever aired on TV for Beanie Babies were when they did the McDonald's Happy Meals, but those weren't even Beanie Babies ads. Those were McDonald's ads that just happened to
Wow.
feature Beanie Baby Happy Meal toys. So they built this toy empire without advertising or big retailers. They was like totally independent, and then that's how they um, built up like a perception of scarcity that wasn't there. It was like small pharmacies, which don't even exist now because like CVS and Walgreens destroyed that business. But it was like small pharmacies, small toy stores, small department stores. If you were a chain with like a ton of franchises, you couldn't the Ty would not sell his product to you. And I think that's such an interesting way to build a commercial product, because it runs counter to how like everyone else in that business got big in the 90s. Like Hasbro, one of the biggest competitors, are doing the complete opposite of that. Like they're selling at a discount to Toys R Us, and trying to get on their catalog and having advertising and TV commercials and cartoons and video games and all that shit. Ty went his own way, and for a while, it worked.
That's great. So I had no idea. First off, I had no idea that Ty actually was named after its founder, Ty Warner. No idea.
Yeah,
I
that's where the TY comes from.
Yeah, I see. It's one of those things. One of the things I really enjoyed about your book too, what I was reading of it was that. So I was born in '89, right? And a lot of this
Same
stuff.
here.
Okay, so you're the same age as me then. I I haven't done any research into this era like you have, and I wasn't really old enough to experience to be like cognitively aware of some of the stuff that you talk about, like specifically like the stuff that happened to video games in the late 90s. I knew, like, in being in video game history circles and this and that, a lot of the focus is always on those 1993 hearings with Lieberman. Or is it 3 or 4? Was it 90?
It was 3 and 4. It
Three.
start the hearings start in '93, and there's um, also hearings in '94. So it's like late '93, early '94.
Okay. But like after Columbine, which I had heard already that, they blamed Doom for a little while. Um, I had no idea how far it went into, because I never heard about, like, I've never seen. I'm sure people have talked about it online. It just never came across my eyeballs or ears or anything like that, of like what happened in the aftermath, like what actually happened in terms of the conversation around video games after Columbine. Like, I knew that people blamed Doom and video games, but because people have been doing that for literally my entire life, I was like, okay, so they had a little panic and then it went away, but there was more to it than that. And I had no idea.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you on that. That I knew like Doom was blamed, in the same way like Marilyn Manson was, but I didn't realize, like I knew the popular press went after them, and I remember some of that even continuing into the early 2000s when I was more aware of stuff. But like, I didn't realize the academic cottage industry that sprang up
Yeah.
after Columbine, like a 10x increase in number of articles specifically looking at studying video games linked to aggression after that event, like research funding pouring in to study the harms of video games at an academic level. I because you think of academia being less, like you like to think of it, it's like it's impartial, and they don't just knee jerk to the news, but like they totally did in this instance.
And it's interesting where it happened in academia back with this back, after Columbine, but so it's not one to one, but kind of seeing a parallel to now with the Maha movement, right? With you know what I'm talking about with Maha, Make America Healthy Again, or whatever it is.
Oh, the
Yeah, the
Robert
RF,
Kennedy.
yeah, RFK stuff, where it's basically like crunchy moms, crunchy parents and stuff like that. The people who are anti-vax, anti all this other stuff, and how they use a lot of pseudoscience and faulty science, like science studies that have either been debunked or are not considered from reputable sources. And if I can kind of see how like there's a parallel. Like I know the anti-vax stuff has been brewing under the surface for a while, but like right now it's like really coming out in full force. Um, and kind of seeing that anti-video game sentiment in the 90s and all, like everyone just jumping on this bandwagon with, and you even cited in the chapter, there's like so many different conclusions that were drawn because the methodology used in a lot of these studies for violence in video games was all over the damn place from what I could tell.
Yeah, I mean, it's all over the place, and a lot of it just hasn't been able to be successfully replicated, or more recent research um, finds contradictory findings. So, like, there's been multiple studies that showed that if you control for level difficulty when you're studying gamers in a lab, the aggression will dissipate significantly. So, but what I mean by that is like these academic studies, they'll bring in like 100 undergrads, have them play a violent video game for an hour or two, and then like take a questionnaire, or maybe they'll even take some sort of biological measure of displays of aggression. But a lot of the people doing this aren't gamers. So if you run the study instead, and you have the people who are familiar with games and play a lot of games, play on a hard level. You have people who have never played games at all, play like on the easiest level. Like a lot of that aggression dissipates, and it doesn't matter if they're playing fucking Tetris or if they're playing like Grand Theft Auto. Like it doesn't matter if it's a violent video game or a non-violent. That finding is the same, which indicates that the aggression displayed wasn't so much that it's a video game that had violence. It was they didn't. A lot of these participants didn't know what the hell they're doing. If you're not a gamer and they just throw you into a lab and you're playing something that you can't keep up with, like you're gonna get frustrated.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like, you're gonna get frustrated the same way at Spyro the Dragon that you would at like Resident Evil. Like you're just gonna be mad because it's like you're dying all the time, or you're not advancing, and that wasn't taken into account. Like in a lot of these games, a lot of these studies that initially linked aggression.
I mean, I once again lived that experience very much so in a weird way. Not obviously not in a study, but my dear sweet mother that was afraid of evolution in Pokemon and witchcraft in Harry Potter. I did when I first got into video games. I had an N64 and I was playing Donkey Kong 64, and I wanted my mom to experience it with me because I really liked it. I wanted her to play games with me. She was getting so frustrated because she couldn't figure out the controls.
Yeah.
It was just beyond her. So it's kind of funny hearing about the studies that they study. Like I understand studying non-gamers for this because you want to have like a comparison, but if all you studied was non-gamers and you had people who didn't know how to, like, that would be infuriating. Of course you're going to get angry if you're not good at something, or like trying to figure
Well, you also have the people who are designing the studies are like almost anti-gaming themselves, so they're not being consulted by researchers who play video games. Like if those psychologists partnered with researchers who play video games, that concludes that like what we're saying would have been obvious. that these players are being frustrated, but like
Mhm.
they're being designed by old men who come in with the premise that video games are bad for society and they don't play them in their own lives. They don't necessarily think of that. You know, one
Mhm.
of the weird things that, well, not weird, but like one of the surprising things that came out was like how much of this research in academia was written by old men, and how if you controlled for age of author, the chance of finding like violence or aggression being linked to video games um, varied significantly. Like the older you are as an academic, the more likely you are to blame video games in for all these problems in your study. But like a academic who's like 40, way less likely to do this than someone who, wrote this paper in their 60s.
That makes sense. And I wonder if that same trend would apply to like all like new media, right? Like if you were to take like one of the things that really surprised me in the chapter on video games was just like you going through in a brief way, like a really brief kind of almost, it wasn't a list, but it was, for lack of a better term, almost like a list of new media comes out, listing what that media is, and then what the reaction from naysayers were at the time. Like even books, like being able to read, and there's people who are saying no, it's going to rot their brain, or they're going to, that kind of stuff. One of my personal favorite was when with the radio, where people were saying like, oh, it's making men too feminine and women too masculine.
Yeah, there's always someone who will have contradictory complaints about a new media like that, which is interesting.
I think it's more, it surprises me how often, and it kind of ties into the whole kayfabe thing, I guess, a little bit, how often people will talk out of their ass authoritatively without having done any work, any research to back up their point before they speak authoritatively. And I know we all
Oh,
do this to
yeah.
an extent, like it's human nature, but it's weird to me to, I guess it's just on, because it's on more on a personal level, like to come down so hard on something that you haven't even like done the research on yet.
Oh, like the worst offender would be Frederick Wortham. Like he was the figurehead who was behind the congressional hearings on comic books 70 years ago, and he was this like renowned academic public intellectual type. And I think it was Seduction of the Innocent was the book he had. But his research, where he speaks so authoritatively on how like comic books are just ruining children, like half of it didn't exist or was fabricated. Like it's just like complete bullshit that wouldn't pass any sort of modern peer review. Like he was like doing creative writing, but presenting it
As fact.
empiricism. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he like got a lot of people to his cause, and like including lawmakers, like in New York, in part because of his testimony, they restricted all kinds of words and images from being used in comic book titles and covers. Like, so he was influential for a time until like everyone eventually realized, well, this guy's a quack. You can have a PhD from Columbia and still be a quack.
Yeah, degrees doesn't necessarily measure expertise, depending on the subject, I would guess. And it's funny, like one, like tying this in with the theme of your book too, not just like, so that also kind of reminds me once again of the Maha movement, just because I don't even know who this person is. I wouldn't shout them out even if I did, but there was someone that appeared on Fox News talking about, like recent changes, it's great that they're getting rid of high fructose corn syrup in terms of cane sugar. And almost every nutritionist that I've seen online who has like degrees in this are like, this person doesn't have any credentials. They're just an influencer that they've put on news to speak authoritatively on something, but don't have any credentials to back up what they know.
Yeah,
And
that's Fox's playbook for since the 90s.
I guess it's just kind of funny. The more things change, the more it's a cliche, but the more things change, the more they stay the same, and it's just the same type of arguments, same things. And you touch on that in your book too, where it's specifically in the video game chapter where some of the critics of the critics, for lack of a better term, the people who were critical of the people naysaying video games, who were coming out against video games, the people who were critical of them were saying something along with, had points that were saying that, you know, we go through this every couple of years, like pointing out the exact thing you do in your book, where about, you know, we have these panics every time there's a new media form, only to realize that the people who were panicking didn't do any research into it. So maybe before you have any panic, let's do, like, they didn't even say flat out they were wrong. They were just like, we don't have any data on this yet, so just slow your roll a little bit.
Yeah, the accusations were definitely overstepping the evidence, especially in '99, and the video game industry was under just enormous pressure. At E3 that year, they're supposed to have like an ethics panel, and there was no one there. Like the speakers all pulled out. No one wanted to give comments to press on anything game related, because they were all like, they were fearing that government regulation was going to come their way when the president's saying it, when the New York Times is pressing for it. And they were in a real crisis state. 93 gets more coverage because there's just the congressional hearings are so ridiculous when they're talking about Night Trap and Immortal Kombat.
Yeah.
But I think the threat of like censorship or real restraint on the industry was actually greater in '99 after Columbine, and in the years following, where like that became the narrative of like every time there was a mass shooter, they would try to bring up video games. One interesting study that I came across was there was like I can't remember the exact stat, but it's like just an exponential more likely chance that the culprit will be blamed on video games if the mass shooter was a white kid from the suburbs.
Yeah.
If it was like a black kid or another minority, they would like say like the explanation was always like, oh, that was a troubled kid from a bad neighborhood. White kid does it, and they look for like, well, what media did they consume? This, I must have been a good kid.
What turned this good kid bad, as opposed to with any minority, it's like, oh, it's just the area. Yeah. It's weird how much they even like racially profile just in the news coverage.
Well, so because like if you like in Colorado, oh yeah, the news coverage is a big part of it. But like in Colorado, not far from Columbine, there was a mass shooting 6 or 7 years prior. At a Chuck E. Cheese, there was this kid, I think his name was Nathan Dunlap, and he was a video gamer. He was playing Hogan's Alley at the Chuck E. Cheese right before he started shooting people. He was playing a shooting game right before he started shooting people, never brought up. Like never blamed. There was no national crisis, but 6 years later, white kids shoot up their school in that same town.
And that's even crazier to think about. Like that's even more damning of the racial bias they put in, because that would have been 93, which would have been at the height of the Lieberman shit. Like that would have been, that would have been a home run for almost like any, like if you're trying to pin something on video games, you had it right there. Yeah. That's crazy. That's so messed up. Okay. Wow. I'm loving this conversation, man. I listeners, once again, highly recommend this book, because it's something a little bit different than what we are used to, on what I'm used to doing on the show in terms of like topics, but it really, like, all this stuff ties into video game history. This culture did affect video games, and you touch on it a little bit too in the book with 9/11 and everything. Like even just and how that affected media, and like different shows had to get canceled, or they had to get changed or respond in different ways. I think I don't believe you included in your book, but a really good example of this is Metal Gear Solid 2. Metal Gear Solid 2 the original ending of the game. They had to completely change the final set piece of the game because the game it came out like a couple months after 9/11 in 2001, and it was supposed to feature you like I'm pretty sure like a giant airship crashing into New York City.
Oh man, I didn't know
And
that.
yeah, if it's crazy. Like if you that game's also, if you ever look at some of the stuff that Kojima talks about with like media in that game, it's bizarrely prescient. Like it's creepy how accurate some of it is. Like I don't but in any case, yeah,
Is that cutscene like online anywhere? The one that didn't make it.
that's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Because
didn't
now I
do
like
enough
kind of
research.
want. I played Metal Gear Solid 2, like I don't know, 20 years ago.
Yeah,
And I'm very curious to see the ending that you're describing.
they might have. I feel like I've seen it before, but you know what? Let me also double check to see what specifically. I'm reading this off of Wikipedia, mind you, so just for the sake of ease, so like do some backup research with like
Okay.
sources. But according to Kojima in the documentary Metal Gear Saga Volume 1, the original plot of the game revolved around a nuclear weapon inspections in Iraq and Iran, and had Solid Snake trying to stop Metal Gear while it was located on an aircraft carrier. Uh, and actually, hold on, that was not what I was. Here we go. Significant changes to the game's ending were made late in development following the September 11th attacks in New York, where the finale occurs. A sequence depicting Arsenal Gear's displacement of the Statue of Liberty and crashing through half of Manhattan was removed, as was a short coda to appear after the credits. A breaking newscast showed the Statue of Liberty's new resting place, Ellis Island. Other deleted scenes included Solidus shredding the New York Stock Exchange flag with his sword during the crash of Arsenal Gear, and the fall of this flag over his body after his death. And American flags that were supposed to be on all flagpoles in New York were removed from the title. Yeah, so that's what the original ending was going to be before 9/11 happened. But uh, it's crazy how much, and even then, like I know 9/11 isn't late 90s, but it kind of is at the same time. um
Mhm.
I know it kind of bleeds over, but even that, like, that obviously not necessarily a focal point, but that does also tie into stuff that we deal with now today.
Yeah, I didn't get much into 9/11 though, because I just feel like that's
That would be a
been
whole book in and of itself, I feel
yeah,
like.
yeah, that I wouldn't have been able to do that justice, and so many others have done it.
No, that's fair. And I just realized after I brought it up, I was like, well, this doesn't really tie in. So we'll bring it back. We'll guide it back to 1999. Um, you end the book talking about how low culture can show us a lot about the human condition. Specifically, I have like literally the last like couple lines of the book at the very end in the conclusion section. And I want to read it real quick just because I think it illustrates the question I want to ask. Um, Cultural symbolism is not limited to Shakespeare's inferences or Gatsby's longing for the green light at the end of Daisy's Dock, or whatever meaning pretentious listeners extract from Beethoven's symphonies. You learn just as much about the human condition, if not more, by paying close attention to popular retrograde amusements, and that's the bottom line. So that's how you end your book. And so I like that. I like that idea of like, you because I agree with you in the sense that we can learn a lot about the human condition by this low culture that we, what is disposable, like what are we getting, like what's something that what type of media are we just like tossing and getting rid of, and that kind of stuff, or what low culture are we partaking in. So what I wanted to ask you is, what was something that you learned about the human condition while writing this book?
Oh wow, oh man, I don't think I've been asked that yet. Um,
That means I did my job.
well, I would say that the the times that your people are going through always feel stressful in that moment. So, like what I learned researching all this stuff about the '90s, spending thousands of hours reading stuff from the '90s, watching stuff from the '90s, we look at it now as like the quaint era where America was peaceful, and we had an economic surplus, and it was before 9/11, but after the Cold War had ended. But when people were going through the 90s at that time, there was intense anxiety over regulating the internet, video game violence, new technology, media being distributed in new ways, like intense congressional hearings, government shutdowns,
Y2K.
Y2K panic. Yeah. So it didn't feel so quaint at that time. And at that time, there's probably a lot of people who felt that it was as bad or as worse as it's ever been in the country. So I think we have a tendency to feel like our current times are the most dire, when 20 years after that, people look back and they'll be like, well, wasn't so bad then. That was actually a pretty good time. So what we're feeling now and how dire it is, I do think it is worse now than it is in the 90s. Like, the country's in worse shape for sure. But
Mm-hmm.
like in 20 years, some of our anxieties may be seen as overblown.
Oh, probably. I mean, like, you can even see stuff like even just from a couple years ago that we were so worried about it, and it ended up not really being as much of an issue as we once thought. Like, I remember, like, me, for example, just to throw myself under the bus, like, being genuinely nervous that, like, NFTs are not going to take over, but, like, how bad they are for the environment. And if this takes off, it's just going to make, our climate crisis even worse. And while now that NFTs have been replaced with generative AI, which are also equally, if not worse, for the environment, but like, that fear I had, like, that I shouldn't say fear, that anxiety I had was already unfounded. Like, it's yeah, they're still around, but they're not. There's no NFT boom anymore. They're pretty much, it's a lot less than what it was. So, um, I think that's a really good lesson to take away from it, where it's just, like, all things pass. We don't know how. That's where the anxiety comes from, but all things do pass at some point. But okay, cool.
George Harrison, right?
Did he write that? Sorry.
All things must pass. I mean, he has that song.
Okay. I'm not a big. I don't know the Beatles stuff well enough.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, it's a solo. It's it's actually like, I think it's his big
Is it?
album.
Oh, one of his solo album. Okay,
Yeah. This is like,
or one of
this
his
is
solos. I don't
after
know
the
how many he
Beatles
did.
broke up.
The only other artist that I mean, obviously I know John Lennon afterwards, and then Paul McCartney and the Wings, but I have no idea what the hell Ringo Starr did or George Harrison did after the Beatles. With the exception, I do know Ringo Starr married Barbara Bach, and because I'm a big James Bond fan, and she
Mm.
was in a Bond movie. But anyway, okay. So the last, I have like two kind of final, like, wrap up questions, as it were, for you. Like, I really enjoyed our conversation, Ross. Thank you once again for joining me, man. I appreciate you setting aside the time for this. For my wrap up questions, I asked two questions to wrap up each episode. One kind of, they both kind of change, but they're similar themes. So the first one is, I'm stealing a question from Alan Alda's podcast, Clear and Vivid. Alan Alda, for people who don't know, has a great podcast called Clear and Vivid. Like, I'm just fucking repeating myself, but it's all about the science of communication, and he interviews a lot of really interesting people, and he ends each of his episodes by asking them 7 questions, and they have to give quick responses. I'm not asking you to answer all 7, nor am I asking for a quick response. Just, I like these questions, so I want to ask one of them. So the question I was going to ask here, I don't think I've asked this one in a little while. What do you wish you really understood? I know it's a little bit of a heavy question, so it could be heavy or light depending on how your interpretation. But I'm also kind of vamping here a little bit to give you some time to think. But what do you wish you really understood?
Wow. God and the cosmos. That's what I wish I had a better understanding of.
Where do we come from? Now, honestly, man, this is maybe this, a little bit too personal, but I've been very much deconstructing my religion over the last, like, couple, growing up as an evangelical unknowingly. I've been in that deconstruction phase for the last year, and so I'm kind of with you on understanding God and the cosmos.
Yeah, I mean, religion fascinates me. I've written about that some, and I've spend a fair amount of time thinking about it, reading about it, and I wish I grasped it and understood it better. And I think if I did, or if we did as a species, we'd be able to go about our lives more peacefully and have more meaning in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. My final question for you, and this one's a lot more silly. It's questions from Courtney. Questions from Courtney. Courtney is my wife, who famously, to my listeners, knows nothing about any of my guests on the show. Doesn't follow any of the geeky stuff I'm into or any of that thing. So I always like to ask her for questions, see what she comes up with. It's always weird and random and interesting. So this one, what secret skill do you wish you had? Yeah. What secret
Hmm.
skill do you wish you had?
Man, that's a good one too. Um, some like there's a lot of skills I wish I had, but they would be pretty vanilla. So
It could be vanilla. You don't have to. You don't. Everyone. You don't have to like go something weird. If there is something weird and you feel comfortable sharing, by all means. But like you can be vanilla. That's fine. There's no judgment here.
I mean, well, something that I can't do cartwheels or whistle or do all these basic physical things. So
Okay.
like I kind of wish I could whistle because I can't. Um, but something that I think would be awesome. It would have been more cool when I played sports. But if I could use my left hand and left foot as well as my right side, like if I was ambidextrous,
Yo. Yeah.
that would be awesome. And I think I'd like be able to get more things done around the house and just be like more agile in my day to day.
I am 100% with you on that. I don't know if this, we're talking all about pseudoscience stuff earlier on. I don't know if this is pseudoscience, but I heard like if you practice stuff with your non-dominant hand, it like opens neural pathways or some shit like that. I
Maybe
don't
the
know if
key
it's
to connecting with God from the first question
is
is
just using
using
your
my left. I got to use my left hand more.
That's how you get it. You just have to start using your left hand, and then all of a sudden you're going to understand God and
Yeah,
religion. It's
there we go.
it's flawless. Oh my goodness. Well, Ross, that is all the questions I have for you on this episode. Thank you once again, man. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed our conversation. Actually, technically, this is the last question, but this is a gimme. Where can the good people find you online, and what would you like to promote?
You can just find me at my name.com, rossbenish.com. And well, what I'd like to promote is the book we just spent an hour talking about, 1999, The Year Love Culture Conquered America, and Kickstarted Our Bizarre Times. Um, Other than that, I'm not hawking too much stuff these days.
All right. Any social media at all?
I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. I do have a Facebook, but I post on that seldom. I post on all of them seldom. So link. I'd say Twitter's probably the one I'm on the most, and I'm on there the most during football season, especially on Saturdays during college football.
Oh, okay. All right. So, who's your football team of choice? Out of curiosity.
The Nebraska Cornhuskers are my team, but they've just been a fissure in my ass for 10, 15 years now. I mean, it's been one disappointment after another. So I hope I have something to look forward to and not just, wasted time on a beautiful fall day. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any NFL teams or nah?
Not really. I mean, I watch the NFL because I like football. And, I live not far from the Jets and Giants, but I don't really care like the outcomes of the games. I just want to see close competitive games.
Mm-hmm. I getcha. I getcha. I'm kind of that way with hockey. That's my favorite sport. But while I'm from the Philly area, so I am a Flyers fan. They haven't been good for the last couple of years, so I just like
Mm,
hockey. But
yeah,
anyway, All right. Well, yes, listeners, please go. Obviously, we've been talking about this whole episode and I've shouted it out a whole bunch. Obviously, please go check out this book, 1999, The Year Low Culture Conquered America and Kickstarted Our Bizarre Times, by my guest here, Ross. I will include links to Ross's website as well as this book in the show notes so you can check it out there. As for myself, you can follow me on mainly Blue Sky at stillloadingpodcast.com, but I'm also over on Instagram at stillloadingpod, technically also over on Facebook as well at stillloadingpod. Those are the two best places on social media you can find me. I'm not on Twitter anymore, though my account is still there. It's just a holding place right now. I also stream over on Twitch whenever the hell I'm able to at Still Loading Pod over on Twitch, usually Saturday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But I'm also streaming whenever I am able to. So give me a follow over there, and you can make sure to know when I go live. If you like the podcast, if you like episodes like this and all the other stuff I do, and you want to support the show, please consider giving it a 5-star rating or review on whichever podcasting app you use. It does help more people find the show. It pleases the algorithm gods, I think, I hope. It would really mean a lot to me. You can also support the show over on Patreon. Patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For only $1 a month, you get all the episodes a little bit earlier with better audio quality, as well as access to patron voting rights, which help guide the direction of the show. I do patron polls quarterly, as well as a giant backlog month poll at the beginning of the year, which helps decide every game I'm covering in October, all for my backlog. Most recent poll winner was The Adventures of Bayou Billy for the NES, and I'm so grateful my listeners chose that for me. Excited, I think, to dive into that for an episode. But yeah, that's all at the $1 level. For $3 a month, you get everything previously, plus patron shoutouts, which you heard at the beginning of this episode. For $4 a month, you get all of that stuff, all the previous years, plus 2 mini bonus episodes every month. And for $5 a month, you get everything, all the previous years, plus access to my monthly movie podcast, which right now is called Still Family, my monthly Fast and Furious movie podcast, where all the guests who join me aren't just friends, they're family. And after that, we're almost done that series. After that, who knows? I'm thinking of doing a Kevin Smith movie series. I'm thinking of doing a curated Jason Statham list. I'm going to call it Still Stathaming, maybe. I don't know. It could be anything. So if that interests you, that's all over at patreon.com/stillloadingpod at the $5 level. But that's it. That is all the time I have for you on this episode of Still Loading. Thank you all so much for listening. Ross, thank you once again for joining me.
Hey, good to be here.
And with all that said, listeners, I will see you all next time.